So if I'm masking to try and meet what I perceive that other people want to hear, the work of continuing to be that person is effortful. Whereas if I can show up in my marketing as quirky as I am, as wiggly as I am, as meandering in my discussions as I am, the people who are comfortable with that or drawn to that are the ones that are easy to work with. It just makes my job easier. I can just continue to be me. And it just seems almost too simple. Is that the secret to finding the right people is to just be you?
Yeah. Yeah, because if you put a persona out there that's not you, well, then you just have to keep being that
Oh,
persona.
yeah,
Right? And there's still obviously a balance. Like I'm
sure.
still trying to find that with the social media stuff, especially. It's like, what do I share and how open do I be? Because absolutely, I want to break down barriers and break down stigma.
Yeah.
And I still need to live in my world
Yes.
and be a professional. And absolutely, I can be a professional with my own needs. That's not what I'm saying. But just, there might be some things that I'm not going to talk about.
You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Neek. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. In this episode of the Brave OT podcast, our guest bravely shares her real and raw lived experience as an ADHD and autistic OT who has crafted a business and a life that is sustainable while living with chronic illness. With the energetic and nervous system regulation ebbs and flows of fibromyalgia, borderline personality disorder, chronic fatigue, and other persistent medical conditions, working in a typical OT job would not work for Rebecca. Just as she's crafted a home life that fits and is sustainable, she's also curated a way of working that works with her strengths and needs. As we lean into this conversation with Rebecca Rae Hodgson, the Chronically Resilient OT, we would like to share a content warning to let you know that there is some discussion of suicide, trauma, and self-harm. If you'd like to skip forward to more detail about how Rebecca is working now, part 2 doesn't come with the same content warning. Rebecca, welcome from New Zealand. This is so exciting to have you here. I was just in New Zealand not too long ago, and I sure loved it there. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's such a lovely place. I'm very lucky to be here.
Oh, that's great. So there's a lot of OTs listening. Tell them what it is that you do. What are you doing these days? How are you living these days?
I first just want to do a little introduction to Reo Māori, if that's okay. So, tēnā koutou e te whānau, no whakatū aho, ko Rebecca taku ingoa. So, welcome. Hi, my name's Rebecca. I was born in Nelson in New Zealand, and I currently live in Onikaka, which is a very tiny place at the top of the South Island in New Zealand. I have been here for 2 years now. Left Melbourne at the end of 2020 because the pandemic lockdowns were bad,
Yeah.
and came back to live with my dad on some land here. And yeah, it's been great to get out of the city and figure out a bunch of things, which we'll talk more about.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've moved, you're figuring out some things, you're living in a unique living situation. Do you care to share a bit about that?
Yeah, so sharing land with my dad and stepmom, which, yeah, living back with your parents in your mid-30s is
Yeah.
it's always interesting, but it's actually been really great. And my husband built us a tiny house, and so we live on land with my dog and, yeah, my dad and stepmom, and, like, we have an outdoor shower, and we have some none of the dwellings are connected, and it's beautiful. There's lots of nature, lots of open space, and
Ah.
yeah, it's just there's a river, there's bush, forest real close to walk through, and
Now,
it's, yeah,
did that
perfect.
require a lot of courage? It's not the way most people are living these days. Like it's to choose to shift to living that way. Sounds very courageous to me.
Yeah, so my parents have been here for 17 years or so,
Yeah.
and So I've been coming back every summer. So wasn't entirely foreign, but actually being back and living was quite different. The first winter we were here there's lots of mud. We don't get snow here, but we get lots of frosts. So, outdoor shower at -2 degrees is Celsius.
Yeah.
And the kitchen is most open to the elements as well. So it's a big adjustment.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's how your
Absolutely.
parents live as well? Like, they're not living in a big house and you're out on the land? This is how they
Nope.
okay.
Yeah,
So
we're all in kind of little pod
mhm.
dwellings, and then there's some communal space as well. But
So
very trying to be low impact, low footprint, as self-sustaining as we can, like solar, hot water.
mhm.
Yeah, and most of the electricity in Golden Bay is hydro as well. So it's all,
Mm.
yeah. Yeah, we bring in lots of permaculture principles and stuff in the way we interact with the land and each other.
So you are not working hard to build a giant business so you can have a big house and a fancy car and go on fancy vacations. That is
Nope.
nowhere near your set of goals in life.
Not at all. So I have chronic illness, been living with that for 10 years. And so I can't work full time, but I also don't want to either.
Yeah.
So by moving here, it allowed both me and my husband, because he in Melbourne, he had to work full time. He didn't have a choice because we couldn't afford him not to.
Yeah.
And so by moving here and reducing our living costs, the first year we were here, he built our house and didn't work for outside money at all. And now he's working 15 hours a week,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
He's not slaving away in a cafe every day. He's actually doing his own thing. And same with me, I'm able to, so I have an employed job. I work in a residential mental health program, and then I have my private practice as well. And just there's more flexibility because the costs are low. I don't want to grow. And that's
Yeah.
the tricky thing when you're kind of learning about business, and a lot of the programs that are out there, they're all about growth. And I'm like, I just want to
Scale,
be
scale, scale. Yeah.
no, I just want to be sustainable
Yes.
for me, you
Yes.
know?
And that defining what success is for you. Like, it sounds like success is sustainability, doing something that's values aligned, living your desired lifestyle, working
And
a
not
bit.
burning myself out.
Yeah.
It's actually that success for me is not burning out,
Yeah.
actually working within my capacity.
Mm.
And that fluctuates, so it's difficult
Yeah.
to figure that out. But yeah, to me, that is what success is. Can
Mhm.
I sustain this? Can I do the work that I want to do that's meaningful and important, that supports others, that uses my OT skills? Because for the first bit here in my employed job, I was in this tricky position where what I was doing was within scope of an OT, but I had a limit on what I could do because I wasn't employed as an OT or even a registered health professional. I was actually employed more as a support worker level, and I don't know what that translates to across Canada, US.
Similar. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd graduated because I'm still a fairly new OT as well. I graduated in 2019 and then
Mhm.
started my first job in Melbourne as we went into lockdown in
Oh my
2020.
goodness. Oh my goodness.
And so my first year as an OT, I was trying to learn how to be an OT, still able to go and visit some people in their homes because I was working in disability. But it was really hard. And so then moving back to New Zealand and being in this kind of non-specific and all through, I've done lots of outside the box stuff to stay connected with OT because I took 6 months off after I graduated. But in that time I was like, yeah, I'll volunteer to be on that conference panel. And yes, I'll chair the pain management special interest group. And yes, I'll, so, I was still staying really connected to the profession and doing lots of my own learning and keeping up my registration and professional development and all of that. But I felt like I was not able to use the most meaningful bits
Mm.
of what I can do
Mhm.
in my job. And what I was doing is still meaningful, And I did lots of like, this is what OT could be in this place. And we're getting there really slowly because I still work there. We are getting there slowly. We've made some shifts forward, but it came to a head last year where I was just like, I just want to use my OT and I want to be able to call myself an OT and I don't want constraints on what I can do.
Yeah.
And so I started a private practice.
Why not? Yep.
As you do.
As you do. So I can't find a box that I want to be in. So I'm going to build my own non-box. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
as neurodivergent OTs.
Yeah. Because that's the other tricky thing being rural, right? Is I think there's one OT at our little medical center who works part-time and she works mainly with elderly people. And there's no community OTs as far as I'm aware. I think there's maybe one who works across some schools with various contracts, but otherwise they send OTs over from Nelson, which is a 2-hour drive away. So there isn't the local, I guess, awareness of the breadth of what OT can do.
Yeah.
I've had to have lots of conversations about what we can do and what it looks like. And even now, like the couple of clients I've had aren't local people. I'm seeing them online. And so, yeah, there's still some education going in my local community about what OT can offer. And I've had some disappointments with a couple of workshops not being able to go ahead because I just didn't get any sign-ups. And usually that would be devastating. I don't know. There's something that's happening differently with my brain with this stuff specifically. Like in January, I ran my first workshop and I had one person sign up. And I went ahead and it was amazing. We had a great time. It was a workshop on exploring values.
Awesome.
So I'd created some awesome resources and this lovely workshop. And the first session was about exploring values. And then we'd kind of set some goals. And then there was a week and then we came back.
Yeah.
And then we did some vision boarding.
That's amazing. And truly, like if one person signs up, you've managed a way to market it. You've managed a way for people to sign up. If there's payment, you've managed a way to accept payment. You've managed a way to communicate it. You've managed a way to follow up. That all of those actions, now you know how to do those things. You could do that for more later.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I kind of feel because then I had scheduled in to run the values one again last month. And I also developed a sensory kit workshop and had nobody sign up for either of those in March and April. And usually I'd take that as a huge rejection and a huge, I'm not good enough, whatever the inner critic stuff would be going on.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because I was able to go, well, yeah, like you said, I'm set up now. I can just run this whenever. I've also had a bunch of people ask me if I can run them online, which I haven't had the brain space yet to. It won't take a lot of adapting, but I just haven't had the brain space to do that. So I haven't wasted that time. I've learned a whole lot of things and I've got resources that are ready and I'll be able to do something with it at some point when I'm ready.
Yeah.
And it's just been this fascinating process that, because being out on your own is really scary in a lot of ways. But somehow I've got this, which is very untrue for most of the rest of my life, but I'll just give it a go kind of attitude going on, which, last October, I was like, I'll just start a private practice. And I talked to my supervisor and I was in Bronwyn Painter's Nature OT program as well. Yeah. And we had a chat in one of her calls about what's the least you need to start a business. And it is not much.
It isn't.
It's really not much. You need some insurance, you need some registration, you need some sort of way for people to contact you. Like, it's really quite minimal. And I built a website and got some things set up. I've got cards and brochures, but I hardly use those. And then, so from like October till the end of the year, there wasn't much happening with it, but I wasn't really pushing it either. And then in January, I kind of started focusing a bit more on the social media side. So on Facebook, I'm the Chronically Resilient OT.
I love that name.
And I know not everyone likes the word resilience. So maybe I'll just explain. And I do have a blog on my website as well, explaining why I chose the word resilient. Because, a lot of the times the word resilient gets used to describe just toughening up. And that's not what I mean at all. No. To me, resilience is the softness. Resilience is the allowing yourself rest. It's a self-care. Yes, it's being strong sometimes, but it's knowing when to be soft as well.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to capture that, because that's another thing that I really firmly believe in, is the power of lived experience in OT. And since October, I've had some new diagnoses, which is kind of expanding my own understanding of my brain. So I got diagnosed autistic and ADHD at the end of last year. And that's kind of just blown my mind a little bit and made me kind of query, I guess, some of my chronic illness. Well, not query in a I don't have it kind of way, but in a would I have developed chronic fatigue syndrome if I wasn't autistic and in burnout? Because I like looking back from an autistic lens,
Mhm.
I was absolutely in burnout when I developed chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yeah.
And was it chronic fatigue syndrome? Was it burnout? Yeah, because they can look very similar. So still like in that chronic illness identity, but with the new understandings of neurodivergence being in there as well, and how that impacts the way I am in the world and why things have been really hard. And yeah, looking back and noticing all the burnout periods in my life and the times when things were really hard, and I guess being able to have some compassion for myself. There's this like a lot of kind of flipping back between grief, relief, imposter. Is this really true? And it's
How did I
ongoing.
not know until now? Yeah.
How did nobody know? How did
Yeah.
poor little Rebecca just being sad for her not getting the supports that she needed and the understanding? And that's no one's fault
No.
either. I adapted in ways to get through, and I did get through, as much as my brain tried to tell me not to get through. As a teenager, and even sometimes now, intrusive thoughts of,
Yeah.
but I guess that different understanding, and going back to the lived experience point, is that OTs have such an amazing holistic view of people, and then adding the lived experience to, I can talk to somebody with chronic pain. And while, of course, I don't understand their specific experience because it's their experience and it's unique, I can relate and I can come at it from a very different point than another OT who doesn't have that lived experience. And that's not to say OTs without lived experience are rubbish. I'm not saying that at all.
No, but I
Um,
do think when it comes to neurodivergence, there is a specific skill set that if you haven't lived yeah, I don't think like there's a lot of other conditions where I don't think you have to have lived it. And there are
Yeah.
lots of OTs doing great work with people, yeah, with neurodivergent people, but it's just like something that you kind of can't get until you lived it or live with somebody and are
yeah.
really attuned to them.
Yeah. And I'm not hugely marketing yet that I am working with neurodivergent people at the moment. My kind of, I guess the words on my website are still chronic illness and mental health issues, or
Yeah.
however I phrased it, just because that understanding for myself is still developing.
Yeah.
And people are going to find me, and they're going to, if we click, it's probably because we're both neurodivergent. Um,
We attract our
so,
own neurology, I think. Yes.
I'm not specifically marketing yet that that's something I do or specialize in.
Yeah.
It's still very much from that lived experience angle. Just, yeah, because my own understanding is still developing.
May I ask what my understanding of autistic burnout versus neurotypical burnout that maybe like I think the World Health Organization diagnosis of, or definition of burnout really surrounds around the workplace, and we know it's so much more than the workplace. But what somebody who's an OT who's got more demands than they can handle and they're experiencing burnout, what is the difference between that and autistic burnout? I think it's more than just the factors contributing to it, though that's part of
Yeah.
it.
And I can't actually answer that question yet because it's something that I want to look into.
Yeah.
Because I guess, thinking back, so the time I developed chronic fatigue syndrome, I did a psychology undergraduate, and then I got into a clinical psychology PhD program,
Mhm.
and because I thought that's what I wanted to do. I thought
Yeah.
I wanted to be a clin psych,
Mhm.
and I got into the program, and I got a year and a half in, and I crashed and burned. It was Like, I'd done really well all through undergrad and managed the honors. Like, honors was tricky, but I still managed it. And then I got to this PhD and the wheels fell off. I had, just, I think looking back now, I'm like, I like structure to a certain extent. Sometimes the ADHD doesn't like structure. So it's like a boom, boom, boom in my brain. But so having to do this massive thesis project that didn't have little milestones, like in your undergrad or even in an honors thesis, you've got your time frame, you've got your milestones. And I found in this PhD program, it was so amorphous. So the first year I was doing straight research, and then I transferred into the ClinPsych program because that's the way I got into it. And I just, that first year I was struggling, and I don't think I recognized how much I was struggling. And I was trying to kind of force my way through it. I was being asked to write code for my own experiments, which I just like, that's not my skill set at all. I was going to be doing research into the visual basis of dyslexia, like what's actually happening in the brain when it's hard to read. And I designed this cool experiment and done lots of reading and had all my things organized. And then at the start of 2013, I got really sick with something viral, unspecified viral, because they can never tell. And then I didn't allow the time to recover that I needed. That was in the January. I went straight back into my PhD program in February, started the clinical portion of that. Like, clinical psych PhDs, like, they seem designed to make you burn out. This is a 50% research program, but you've also got 2 days a week of classes and 1 day a week of practical. And so where's your 50% research days going on in there? And it just, like, some days I was only going in to go rock climbing or go for a walk at lunch with some friends. And like, things got really, really dark. And by the July, I was like, oh yeah, I'll take 2 weeks holiday and I'll go back to New Zealand and things will be fine. Things were not fine.
I hear the narrator come in and things were not fine.
Things were not fine. As that dog meme, I was sitting at the table with things burning around me. So I got back from New Zealand and things were okay for a couple of days, and then it was like boom again. And so a month later, I'd packed everything up and I'd moved back to New Zealand. And I wasn't sure if it was a one-way thing. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I put all my stuff in the garage at my mum's and left. And like, at that stage, I wouldn't have called it chronic fatigue syndrome. It was more, breakdown would be the non-specific language that kind of gets used. But looking back, it was absolutely burnout. You might need to put a trigger warning at the start, but I was really suicidal. Things were really dark. I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't know if I could go back to the PhD. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Maybe I'm not capable. Like, what did you have those types of thoughts? Like, clearly, I'm just not even cut out for this. I'm not good enough for this.
Oh, absolutely. And I developed some issues with eating as well. And that had been really restrictive for a time. And then when I kind of let all my demands go, that turned into a binge. And things got really messy.
Oh.
And so I did take 6 months in New Zealand. For ages, I was like, oh, I'll go back to the PhD. I'll go back to it.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And interestingly, I didn't see that as a failure. I was really worried. There'd been quite high academic pressure in my families. And so I was really worried specifically about telling my mum that I was going to withdraw from my PhD. It did take me the 2 years. You're allowed to take 2 years off before you kind of have to withdraw or go back. So it did take me the 2 years to finally go, no, this is actually not for me. And telling my mum, that was terrifying. And then her response was, I just want you to be happy.
Aww.
And it was so beautiful that because I'd internalized from somewhere this messaging that academics was my worth and productivity was my worth and my value. And I was able to, and now still looking back on that, it wasn't a waste of time.
Oh no.
Education
never is. Yeah.
No, I learned a lot of things and a lot of skills. And then So I moved back to Australia at that time. I was living in Canberra, and I floated around. I did a couple of certificate level courses. I did a course in education support, and I did some work at a special education school and absolutely loved that. And then I did a certificate in disability support as well. And I was working with adults in the community, and I was working in an after school care program and just getting more interested in this disability space. So I'd always kind of been interested because doing clin psych, I'd wanted to be an educational psych. And I always thought I wanted to work with children. That changed.
Me too. Interestingly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is my like curvy journey to OT. And so I was doing this work in disability and knew that it wasn't going to be enough. You know, I'm not just a turn up, deal with what's happening on the day and go home again. I'm a big picture thinker.
Yeah.
I want to know the context. I want to know what's behind this. I want to know how are we moving forward. This isn't to me just about the day to day.
You were built as an OT, really. Like you just didn't know
100%. So I was like, okay, so disability is kind of the field.
Yeah.
But I want to be more than a support worker. And support workers do amazing work. And I was a support worker for 10 years, and I continued being a support worker while I was studying OT. And even now, my employed job, my job title is support worker.
Yeah.
So none of this is to denigrate support workers. No. I just knew for my brain, I needed more context. I needed to know that we were working towards things. Needed that kind of, that bigger picture. And I started thinking about OT, and a friend introduced me to one of her friends who had just finished her OT degree, and we had a chat. And she gave me, I wish I could remember the actual book. I think it was Occupational Science. It might have been about occupational justice.
Yeah.
It had a black and white cover. That's not going to help anybody. Yeah. But it lit me up, and it completely made me go, oh, this is the thing. Yeah. This is the thing I wanted psych to be. That it was never actually going to be. Right? And so all of this twisty journey of this didn't work out and I got really unwell and then I did these other things. Well, it all led me to OT. And then it was that kind of light bulb thing. And so, this friend lent me some books and we're still in touch. We've got monthly catch-ups, kind of like a peer supervision, but it is whatever we want to talk about. And so we still keep in touch and it's so beautiful. And so she is the one who got me hooked on OT.
Yeah.
With her passion for OT, because I'd never really heard about it before.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I'd done psych at high school and then in my undergrad and through, and OT is never something I had come across. Mm-hmm. And so she lit that spark. And if she's listening, she'll know who she is.
Okay. You can call her out if you want to.
So she lit that spark. And then I was like, okay, so how do I get there? So I was still living in Canberra at the time and decided, I'd been in Canberra 10 years, decided I needed a change. And so we moved to Melbourne. And I didn't get into the program that I'd wanted to get into, but then another uni started running an OT program as well. And I got in there and so the chronic illness stuff is still, I'd kind of, through this time, I'd gone from being able to work maybe 2 hours a week to being able to do some part-time study and a couple of days of work a week. And so I got to the OT program and I was like, oh yeah, I can do this full time. It'll be fine. And it's a graduate master's program because I already had the undergrad. So I didn't need to go back through an undergrad, which was good. Yeah. So I thought full time was going to be okay. It was not okay.
It again, would not the narrator's, be okay.
Yeah, it was not okay. So I managed the first year. I think I managed the first year full time. I got a little accommodation on my first placement to do 4 days instead of 5. And then I was heading to burnout again. Mm-hmm. It was just...
You're like, oh, my old familiar friend, I know you. Yes.
Yeah. Because I was still working as well because financially I kind of had to, even with my husband working, partner at the time. So it's headed straight for another burnout. And I managed to talk to my department. Ironically, OT schools seem to be not so great at accommodating.
I know. Isn't that the strangest? I think there's actually a bit of an upheaval in the US about it in particular as well. But we should be the best at it.
Yeah. So Yeah. So since then, I've heard that this is not uncommon, but
Mm.
it was really difficult. So my second placement, I can took some convincing, but I did 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And then I was still working some weekends as
Yeah.
well.
And did you have any
Nights.
accommodations in class, like when you were doing classes, or it's just in your placements? Yeah.
Just in the placement, I did. So the disability services at my university were great and
Yeah.
they helped me advocate for things. I mean, if I knew more about my brain now, I would have asked for some different things. I didn't. I was kind of going on this, okay, this is chronic fatigue syndrome, what developed into fibromyalgia around that time as well with chronic pain. And I was kind of hiding the mental health stuff behind those physical health things. And that's
Sure.
some of my own internalized stigma around that.
You're not alone.
Um,
So many people do. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really interesting around that time. And no, actually, I'm just going to be open about this because I want to work on reducing the stigma. I got diagnosed with borderline personality disorder as well. And this was right before I went on placement into a mental health unit,
Right.
which is an
Uh,
interesting timing.
that would be
Um,
because borderline personality disorder isn't talked nicely about among staff members generally, right? There's a
no.
lot of stigma within employees. Well, you probably listened to all of Keir Harding's stuff as well. And
Yes,
here you are with
I love
lived
his stuff.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so that was one I was very quiet about.
Sure.
And I was so pleased when we did have a lecturer come in to do a lecture on borderline personality disorder that was so affirming and supportive. And I actually went up to her after the class and was like, I've just been diagnosed and I'm so grateful
Oh,
that you're talking about it in this way and not the way that it's talked about online as in such a negative way.
that's me
Um,
choked up because that experience really would be very unique. Like it would, if you think of 1,000 classrooms around the world, for you to have that experience in that moment is
yeah,
so
yeah.
powerful.
And
Mm,
I'm sure that many classrooms are not having those kind of lectures and they will
no.
be getting the stereotypes and they're so manipulative and
Yeah.
all those kind of negative stereotypes when borderline it's a response to trauma.
Hmm.
Your personality is not disordered. It's a response to trauma, the adaptations that make sense given someone's history. And that kind of came in at that point as well. And it was tricky. And then after doing that placement, I realized that for the final year of my study, because it was a 2-year master's,
Hmm.
I needed to do it part-time. And the department was kind of like, oh, but don't you want to finish on time? And my response was, I want to finish.
Yeah.
And
What timeline is there? Yeah.
if I keep pushing through, I'm not going to finish this.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to. I was like so passionate about OT. And so I did manage to go part-time.
And she did finish. Yes.
And I did finish and I
Yes.
graduated. And it was just like, and I was so burnt out even at the end of that. I took 6 months off. I mean, I was still working because you've got to have some money coming in, but it was just too much at that point to consider working as an OT. And then even I was like thinking, how can I work as an OT? What is actually going to be sustainable? And I was very lucky in that I found a workplace that what did we get to? I think it was 16 hours a week. I was going to do 2 days a week. And this was my first job as we were going into lockdown and just, yeah, it was all a bit nuts. Yeah. And even trying to do 2 full days a week, I was like, okay, that is not okay either. So this has been so much trial and error about what works for me. And at the end of kind of doing that year and then the last 2 years in this residential mental health program, I don't love working for other people. Being able to set my hours and focus on what I want to focus on and not have to be, because in my OT practice at the moment, I'm only private. I'm not registered with any funding bodies. It's just too much for a one person. I do one afternoon a week in my private practice of like, that's dedicated. I do more than that, but the dedicated, the room that I hire is one afternoon a week. And that's lovely.
Mm.
I can have a couple of people
You don't
and
have
so
to worry
setting
about a
up,
lot of bureaucracy because you don't have these outside funding sources and the pressure of filling a large practice. You just,
yeah,
yeah.
and we can focus on what the person wants to focus on and go at whatever pace Obviously, we want to be doing stuff so that they feel like they're paying for something that's useful. But it's just being able to do it at my pace, and also being able to say yes to the people I want to say yes to, and not just having to take everybody, because I'm not going to fit with everybody. Nobody is. No OT is going to fit with everybody. And so often in the jobs, we get these caseloads that sometimes people are not a good fit.
Yes. And those
And
ones exhaust us. Yeah.
yeah, and so being able to have more choice in that. And I've also done a bit of running peer support groups for people with chronic fatigue syndrome, and just found so much joy in that. And that was another part of wanting to build a private practice, is to be able to offer some groups and offer support and offer one-on-one. And then what's actually taken me by surprise this year is the social media side, and I can write things again.
Mm.
And oh my gosh, I can create graphics and worksheets. And as someone who's always been, oh, I'm not creative.
Mm. You sure are. I've seen it. You look very
Yeah,
creative in what you're putting
yeah,
out. Yeah.
yeah, creative in my way, right?
Yeah.
And being able to use that, because I don't have the energy to see many people one-on-one,
Mm.
but by having an online presence and platform, and then being able to write things and make worksheets, like, and that's all there. That kind of helps screen people for me. Like, people will contact me. I've had a couple of people contact me now going, hey, I really love your messaging on the website, or hey, I've read a couple of your blogs and really resonate with what you say. And then they reach out to me. So I'm doing very little active marketing, except for with the worksheets. Like, I'm not actively marketing my one-on-one stuff.
But it's so nice because there's this connection of, okay, well, how much do I actually need? You've set your life up in a way that earning a lot is not required. You've and it's a values aligned way. It's not like you're like, well, I'm gonna go live out in the in a rural area because I can't. No, it's a choice. This is a chosen,
Yeah.
this is in your family. This is natural for you. And it's aligned with who you are. And that gives freedom to be selective. That gives freedom to not have the pressure of doing things you don't want to do, scaling to this level you don't want, choosing how much. And I'm not saying that it's not hard. Like you said, it fluctuates your capacity at times. But I think it's so beautiful because so many people are caught up in this expectation of what success is and what productivity should be and what the outcome is and what a full-time OT should earn. And all of these things, all of these shoulds and assumptions keep people bound into growth and more, 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 more. And if they were to pause and listen to your story of your life by design, truly, you've made something to fit you. And it sounds really nice.
Yeah. And I have a whole bunch of privilege that I do acknowledge in
Yeah.
being able to do this. Like, my parents are not wealthy by any stretch. They were lucky to get in on the land they did when they did, with support.
Yeah.
And so then we were lucky to be able to move here, and that there was space for us, and to be able to reduce our costs. And I have an employed job, so there's not so much pressure on the private practice to be making my whole living, because I'm not actually relying on it. So it can be what I want it to be.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole lot of privilege in there.
Yeah.
And but it's also the way I need to work. So I do, and things are shifting in a positive direction in my employed job as well. So I've just been able to take on a bit of care coordination, so the kind of case management kind of stuff, but quite
Yeah.
focused on people's transition out of the residential, which is so OT.
Mm.
And it's just
And probably
beautiful.
pays a little bit better than the personal support work, does it?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm still advocating and negotiating in that space for it to be recognized as OT, because it is.
Mhm.
And I have these conversations. I have a great OT supervisor here as well, and she's like, "But it is OT." I'm like, "I know." They don't want to pay it as OT. And so I'm like, I haven't given up on that. I'm still in this job. I've been there almost 2.5 years, and things have been really slow to change. And I haven't given up on it, because I firmly believe in the power of OT in that space and in mental health, and to be supporting people to build their meaningful life. So I'm kind of able to do both. And it's not easy, and it's tricky to juggle. Like, in April, I was definitely getting close to a burnout because I decided it'd be good to do some more study this year just because.
Why not?
Yeah.
Learning's fun. Yeah.
Why not? I mean, I do love learning. I
Yeah.
absolutely love learning. So not sure it was a great idea to do on top of work and private practice. So in April, I was kind of like, yeah, I had private practice stuff going on and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to do a lot of content creation and to be really available online. And then stuff was changing quite quickly in my employed job as well. And I was trying to figure out how my hours were going to look there and getting them settled. And then I had the study as well and quite a large assignment to work on. And so in April, I was like, oh no, I recognize this. And so it is an ongoing balance, like knowing about the autism and ADHD, just it makes some things make sense, but it also adds all these other layers to this picture that already had chronic fatigue, brain fog, pain, all these other things, fluctuating mental health that is, I've done a lot of work in the last 20 years. No, but specifically the last kind of 5 or 6 years, some really, really intensive work, some really useful therapy. Never kind of got much out of cognitive behavioral therapy, but loved ACT. I had a therapist who did ACT, and then I did some cognitive analytic therapy as well in Melbourne, which a lot of people haven't heard of, but it was a lot of like mapping and figuring out like, so this happens because of this. And there was this, I just want to talk about this example because it's been really crucial in my own life so I was noticing that when my husband was in the other room with his headphones on and couldn't hear me, I was going 0 to 100 and melting down and I didn't know why. And so doing this, the CAT therapy, cognitive analytic therapy, we did this whole mind map so there might be like I'm going to explain this really badly. There's like a behavior and a response and it comes from somewhere.
Yep.
And what we managed to figure out was that my abandonment button was getting triggered.
Oh, yeah.
So when my husband couldn't hear me, instead of my brain being able to go, he just can't hear me, my brain was going straight to, he doesn't love me.
Yeah.
I'm abandoned. This is unsafe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
fits in with the rejection sensitivity, borderline personality disorder, all the things, right?
All of the things.
Yeah.
All of the things. And so being able to, and doesn't work all the time, but just knowing that about myself made it possible for me to call him.
Yeah.
Or something.
Little text, hey, hope you're having a good day.
Yeah. Instead of going straight to meltdown.
Yeah.
And it just created that space to be able to respond because I wasn't eligible for funded DBT and I couldn't afford it privately. So I kind of ended up needing to go this other route.
Yeah.
And so all of that understanding, and then that understanding is now evolving so much more with understanding an autistic brain and an ADHD brain because I suspected it was both, but I wasn't sure. And then both the diagnoses came through and I was like,
okay.
Yeah.
Give the map about all that for sure. Yeah.
And it's changed a lot and it hasn't changed a lot as well, because I'm still me.
Yep.
I'm just still me, but I'm openly using a fidget.
Yep.
And I have a weighted toy on my lap.
I noticed you put that on your lap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I've been twirling my cord around my thumb over and over and over again. Yeah. Built-in fidget.
And this is just so amazing. And I guess it's given me some more permission to use those things that I need to use because I never thought I was a fidgeter.
Yeah.
But I think I've just squashed it down real deep. I fidget by taking notes because that's socially acceptable.
Yes.
And so like in a work meeting, I'll volunteer to take the minute.
I sometimes do too. It keeps me focused. I don't miss
me focused.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's been really wonderful. And this is, I've been sharing quite a lot of this on my page about how I've been managing the study in a different way. Like I've got some little earplugs so I can still hear, but it reduces some of the background hum. I've been openly fidgeting in class. I've been advocating for extra breaks. I've been like all these things that I'm like, and even because the study's in a different town, I have to drive 8 hours each way to get there. So it's even like going is a big thing. And for the first time when I went down to Christchurch in February, I took my weighted blanket And I took the pillow that I need to, like, it's given me that, I've given myself permission to use these things. I'm like, if they're going to make things just that little bit easier,
Yeah.
then why not? And then I had some of my classmates go, oh, what are those things in your ears? Or I really love that you've brought that. Or just, oh, and actually I'm really short, so I take a footstool as well. And they were just like, I love that you bring your own footstool. That's so OT. And I'm like, yes, it is.
Are your earplugs the loop ones?
I've ordered loops. I've got the calmers, which I haven't
Okay.
found are super useful for me. So I've
Yeah.
ordered the loops to see if they're different.
Yeah. I know a lot of the OTs in my Activate Vitality program have ADHD and are not yet diagnosed. And the loop, every time people tell me, where do you get these things? People get excited. But honestly, I don't find myself reaching for them as much. I'm more likely to put my noise canceling earphones on, or even just
Yeah.
that physical barrier. I don't even need to turn on the noise canceling.
Yeah, I think I'll use these. I prefer to use these, but if I'm in like a work meeting,
Where you need to
this
listen.
feels this like I can still hear with these on, but
Mhm.
that feels a step too far. And again,
Yeah,
that's some of my internalized ableism.
sure.
And it feels like a step too far at this point.
Well, that's the end of part one of this discussion with Rebecca Rae Hodgson, the Chronically Resilient OT. Please go straight to part two, where we talk a lot more about how she's crafting and curating her work to fit her strengths and needs. If you'd like to reach her, please visit chronicresilienceot.com. And if you've been enjoying the Brave OT podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a review or rate the podcast through your podcast platform. It helps the show reach the people who need to hear it most. As always, be brave, OTs.